Hey everybody, it's Joe from greenlightsound.com, and today we're going to take a look at a newly updated plugin from PSP, and this is the new version of their PSP 42, based upon, of course, that classic Lexicon PCM 42. Version 2 adds some more precise modeling of the hardware's audio path and allows you to choose how much of the character of this original hardware unit you would like to use. It also adds up to 28,800 milliseconds of delay time, has an adjustable high-cut filter frequency, LFO tempo sync and waveform phase adjustment, adjustable input sensitivity to simulate -10 dBV or +4 dBu operation, modeling of the original hardware's analog limiters and the AD and DA converters, plus a whole bunch more. So a really big update to this plugin. So let's dive right in and talk about the controls because there's quite a bit going on here. And if you just want to go straight to what it sounds like, take a look at the description. I've got a timestamp for where the audio examples start. So starting on the far left-hand side, we've got our headroom meter here. And the headroom meter indicates the signal levels of the mixed input and feedback signals. Right next to that, we've got the delay ×2 button. So up is ×1 and engaged is ×2. And that doubles the selected decay time by cutting the sample rate in half, which also creates a lo-fi effect by affecting the frequency range of the delayed signal. It also drops the wet signal by an octave when it's first pressed because of that sample rate change, but then it returns to normal pitch once the entire buffer of the audio has been played back, unless you're in repeat mode, which we'll talk about later. Then we've got our input control next, the typical input knob, and this goes through the limiters and the saturation, so pushing this input affects the signal's harmonic content. The output, of course, is a typical output control. The feedback knob controls the signal repeats. The high cut button, when engaged, is a 6 dB per octave 6K filter, but that can also be adjusted down in the extensions panel, which we'll talk about in a minute. The FB invert, the feedback invert button, inverts the phase of the feedback signal, which is not really audible on long delay times, but it really can alter the sound of short delay times when you flip that phase. The delay invert button right next to it inverts the phase of the wet or process signal, and again is really only audible with short delay times. The output mix right here in the middle is a typical wet-dry mix knob. You've got an infinite repeat button here, which basically turns the delay into a phrase sampler. It captures the audio input at the same length as the set delay time, which we've got over here. In delay time mode, it's activated as soon as the button is pressed and will continue to loop until that repeat button is turned off. When you're in clock mode here, CLK on the slider above, it will begin capturing at the next clock tick, and you can kind of see the LED blink for when that clock changes. And it'll continue until the clock tick after the repeat is turned off. You can also change the sample rate of the loop with the delay ×2 button or use modulation for playback speed and pitch alterations. So a whole lot you can do with that infinite repeat button to create some really wild effects. That little slider I just mentioned between delay and clock, when it's on delay, it's of course in milliseconds, delay time set in milliseconds. When it's on clock, it is tempo based here. And the down and up buttons change two different things. If you're in delay mode, it's how many milliseconds your delay is for. And in clock mode, it's the different bars and beats time. For example, 1 and 4 means 1 quarter note here. You can shift click on the buttons for some more sort of unusual time alterations. You've got a drop down menu right here to choose them all as well. And if you're in the delay mode, you can use this slider in the middle to avoid a whole bunch of scrolling with these buttons and get to really big or short delay times very easily by just holding down left click and sliding up and down. The 3 LED dots right here to the right of the display, the CLK one blinks in sync with the host tempo or your millisecond time, depending on what you've got selected, delay or clock mode. The LED next to this would mean that the repeat mode is on. So when I engage that, you can see the repeat is in. And if I put the ×2 button here, we've got our 6 kilohertz LED indicating the ×2 is engaged. The manual knob right next to the LED readout controls the internal delay buffer sample rate in relation to the host sample rate, anywhere between 0.5 and 1.5 times the host's sample rate here. So you can see that change there manually. The depth knob sets how much the internal sample rate is affected by the modulation signal, which is a combination of the LFO and envelope detector signals. The waveform knob switches between sine and square LFO waves. You can see sine all the way on the left, square all the way on the right. And if it's straight up and down the middle, it is only affected by the envelope detector. And the rate over here sets the LFO frequency anywhere from 0.1 hertz to 10 hertz. And the rate LED blinks right there at the frequency you choose. When sync mode is on down here, the knob changes to choose bar and beat values tied to the host tempo. You can see right below that's quarter note. All right, let's jump down past the main interface down to the extensions panel here. The limiter LEDs right here show the depth of the input limiter and pre-AD limiter processing when limbs and full mode are selected, which we'll talk about in just a second right down here. In legacy mode, when you click on this, it indicates the depth of the tape saturation processing. So you get some different processing depending on what you're choosing with these selectors right here. The sensitivity switch right down there switches between the semi-pro -10 dBV or the pro +4 dBu reference, which allows you to kind of set the headroom of the processing along with the reference knob. And this can be also used to overload the circuit, which is really cool. The reference knob right next to that sets the reference level for the saturator, limiters, and converters. So a lower reference level equals a greater level for the limiters, saturators, and converters, driving that signal even harder. We've got 4 types of processing you can choose from here. Clean processing is no limiter, no saturator, no converter emulations at all. Just a clean digital delay. Legacy is like the old PSP42 and has a tape saturator from the original built into it. Limbs as the input and pre-AD optolimiters from the hardware, so that hardware modeling. And we can go with full modeling here, which has the limiters and also the A to D and D to A converter modeling, giving you the full experience of the original hardware unit. As I mentioned earlier, this high frequency cutoff signal can affect what happens when you hit that high cut button. So rather than a fixed 6K, you can slide it around anywhere from 2K all the way up to 18K. This bypass button is kind of unique because the drive signal is still affected by the input opto limiter when you're in limbs or full mode over here. So when you hit bypass, you're still going through the signal path of the processing, just not with the delay in. If you want to turn the entire thing off, you just hit the power button over here, and that would mean there's no processing at all going on. We've got 4 different direction buttons here. Forward is the default state, which means we are reading and writing in the same direction. When we choose backwards here, we have the opposite direction of forward, of course. Reverse are reverse delays, and bounce is alternating between forward and backward delays. The envelope invert here sets the envelope follower to inverted mode, which is a compatibility mode of the original PSP42 plugin. We click sync here to turn the LFO sync on or off, and when it's on, we can use that phase knob to set the LFO waveform's phase offset or starting point. And again, it's only active when that sync is turned on. We've got a few side chain controls down here at the bottom for internal or external side chain inputs and whatever blend we want between those. And we can monitor that side chain input as well. And that covers all of the main controls of this plugin. All right, so let's get right into how this thing sounds. We're going to go with the default preset first here. I'm going to bypass the plugin to begin with, just so you can hear the dry vocal to begin.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
Typical multi-tracked vocal. Now I'm going to gauge the plugin, put it in full wet mode because it's on ascend here.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
You can see we've got the full processing going on here. So the limiters, saturation, the converters are all being processed. If I go to clean mode, we'll take that same 250 millisecond delay and we get none of that processing.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
Back to full hardware modeling.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
Definitely a change to the character or tone of that one for sure. Let's go through some other presets past the default here. How about wiper?
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
So you're getting that really slow LFO oscillation, phasey, hollow sound there. Moving ahead, how about some wow tape? And on this one, you're going to see the LFO have some drifting of that delay time.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
It's got that high cut in to kind of simulate that tape delay. How about Leslie?
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
That's a great example of how this can be used not only as a typical delay, but also for some nice effects there. That's a really cool Leslie vocal effect. There are a ton of presets. Let's pick another one. How about we go classic 1 to 8 echo.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it. I'm pressing my luck. You can have it, but I don't need it.
It's really cool, sort of saturated, lo-fi sounding echoes. Pick another one. This one's called Bit Crush.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
Again, another sort of effects-based rather than just pure delay. Moving ahead, let's do Pitch Shifter.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
As we're moving that delay time, we're really hearing that change in pitch.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
It's a nice way of getting that delay to not be just a sterile, exact pitch, but drifting around a lot, which is really cool. Let's do a couple more. How about it backwards? 1, 2.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
Let's go with fluttering delay here.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
You can really hear those little clicks and flutters in there. And how about we'll go for a reverse delay here.
I'm holding my breath. You can take it, but you don't need it.
So this unit's really capable of all kinds of really cool classic effects. So big kudos to PSP for updating the plugin and making it so awesome. I really enjoy using this plugin. I highly recommend you check it out. I'll put a link down in the description below. You can check out the updated PSP 42 for yourself. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already, so we can keep you in the loop as to what's coming up next, and I'll see you in the next one.